Hey there, this is Dan. You're watching The Salty Sea, and I am fishing for the perfect Warcry mission. Let's talk about what that means. I am going to be hosting a tournament. For those of you who don't know, I'm going to be calling it the Talaxian Cataclysm, and I'm very excited about it. I'm going to have it be the same sort of narrative plus competitive fusion that I did in January. It's going to happen May 6th. So if you're in Minnesota, please come by. If you're in the upper Midwest, please come by. Would love to see you. I'd love to see other people too. I just understand it's a travel. But I'm going to be doing some narrative stuff around the aftermath of the previous tournament. Chaos won the narrative. Black Sun also did very well. So all of the narrative quests are going to be living in a world in which Chaos has started to tear through the Gnarlwood and kind of figuring out what that means. Competitively, I'm really interested in picking up some new interesting missions. The core book has been around for quite a while now. A lot of people have gotten chances to play all of the matched play missions that are in the core book. GW released a sort of expansion of missions called the Rumble Pack in November that included 6 more matched play missions that came with secondary missions that introduced a lot of really cool gameplay concepts, but taken as a whole, I just don't think are very balanced. Each one individually is good, I just don't think they're good as a group. So it really made me think about what makes the perfect tournament mission, because a lot of the core book ones can be either on the simple side or they can just be very much sort of wonky. So things like Cursed Relic, things like No Quarter aren't necessarily the best designed missions. And then, of course, everything I said about the Rumble Pack. So I really value, first of all, variety in mission packs. So the core book, one of the things we started learning quickly enough was that because scoring points really doesn't happen until late in the game, it really favored warbands with staying power. So really elite lists were generally doing well, other than a few hyper efficient swarms. And then in the Rumble Pack, kind of the opposite is true, where just swarming the board and scoring all the points is sort of the name of the game, because 5 of them are objective missions, and one of the objective missions, whoever wins round 2 wins the entire game, which is, very wild. So I like to have a little bit more sort of variety and balance. And then I think one of the other really important things is strategy, right? The deeper you can make the mission, hopefully they're still always going to be playable while, drinking, while eating snacks, doing whatever it is you like to do on the weekends. Warcry is great because it's simple, and, I strive to make every mission kind of doable like that. But I still want to have a lot of depth to it, something where you want to come back to it over and over again. And that's something that not every matched play mission does very well right now, although the Rumble Pack does do it pretty well. And so I took a lot of those lessons. Finally, I want it to be easy to use. And this is something I've come across in multiple tournaments where not every mission is colorblind friendly. I know red and blue as a group are supposed to be colorblind friendly, but then putting them, through a printer can really make that worse. You never know how a printer is going to distort things. So I wanted to use shapes instead of just colors for them. And then instead of those symbols, the symbols are really good if your printer is amazing. But if your printer is not amazing, the symbols are just not good to be using. So I just used letters. And so here's my first of 12 missions that I've made. And I'm just going to go through them all today. I'm really excited. And I'm going to talk about sort of what my goals were for each of these. So the first one's Might Makes Right. And this is inspired by the Red Harvest mission, which is also called Might Makes Right. And one thing that's really cool about it is it has one objective in the center, and then each player places 2 objectives, which is kind of gives a really cool level of strategy to the game. But you can also just be like, I'll stick it here. And I see people do that a lot. And I also see people agonize about it a lot. And so you can really take whatever your personal level of sweatiness is into this mission. And I think that that's really cool. Finally, Swarm Warbands and Elite Warbands both have a lot of play on this mission, and so I find it really balanced in that way where if you're a good Swarm Warband, you can get on all of these missions. You can both get to the center and overwhelm in numbers on your own mission and score a lot of points that way. But if you're a really killy warband, maybe with not so many models, you can get a lot of takedowns on those objectives and try to make up for points that way. As long as you score a takedown every point, or on every objective that you lose, it doesn't matter that you lost it, right? So there's just a lot of different ways to win this mission, and I really, really love that. I love that a lot of different types of warbands can succeed here. Finally, one thing I have noticed is if you don't use terrain well as the faster warband, this will slightly favor the slower warbands. I've made a couple changes since I play tested it. At first, the daggers were a little bit closer to the center there, and that was making it really, really easy for the slow team to just be already crowding the center objective right from the get-go, and making it almost impossible for any faster team, faster and slightly weaker, in combat team to ever outlast them on those objectives. Even as is, it'll still, slightly favor slow teams, but like I said, I love variety. I've got missions that do the exact opposite. So I really like this mission. I've played it a few times. I had a ton of fun with it, and I hope you do too. I'm going to kind of keep on going with showing really cool cards from expansion sets that most people don't have, right? The previous one is from Red Harvest, and is really cool because I think it was the first time they did an objective and kill mission in the same card. This one I think is from Sundered Fate, and this one's called The Most Dangerous Game. So a lot of people won't have this one. This is each player picks one enemy fighter to be hunted during each round, and then you get a point every time you take down a hunted fighter. But if that was the enemy leader, you score 2 points. And if that fighter had the highest, or tied for the highest wounds characteristic, you score 3 points, which is really great because most hunter missions really favor sort of being elite but also being fast. And like I said, since I knew that might makes right favors the slow warband, I wanted something that helped out a fast team. But the scoring here does kind of change things a little bit, where elite warbands, it won't be quite as favorable to them as a normal hunter mission is. It'll still overall favor them slightly, but not by nearly as much, and I think that's really cool. There's also, these are things that aren't really rewarded in a ton of missions right now, being able to reach out and take something down. Towards the end of 1.0, in the last Tome of Champions, a lot of people were having a ton of fun with it, and a lot of folks, other than spiders being really good, a lot of people nicknamed it Dragon Meta, where having a 10-inch flyer in your warband was really, really important because they were just really, really good in a lot of those games. And one thing that's happened in 2.0 is those 10-inch flyers have really been, or at least the powerful combat ones, other than the Mizzen Master, they've essentially been pushed out of the metagame. And there's a variety of reasons for that, but one of them is that the ability to chase something down and kill it is a lot less important than it used to be. Having staying power is much more important in a lot of these missions, or having overwhelm swarm power. Those are really the two things that are generally rewarded, and dragons don't do either of them. So this is something that actually sort of might tempt you to bring a big 10-inch flyer, or even a 10-inch flyer the size of, say, an Arch Revenant, right? That's not going to be the biggest, scariest thing on the field necessarily, but is still going to be scary and really fast. So I really like that. I really like having that element in my mission pack, and so I think people are going to have a lot of fun with this one. So the best treasure mission is Loot and Pillage. So I wanted to do something similar to that and just do some iterations, bring some freshness to it, right? So Loot and Pillage is really good, and then Conquering the Land is one of the secondary objectives. I've got a few here that are sort of simplifying or sort of repackaging various really good Rumble Pack combos. A lot of the combinations of secondary objective plus regular objective don't quite work in the Rumble Pack, and a lot of them are quite good. And so I wanted to take some of the best ones and then kind of repackage them in a new, fresh design. So here, instead of doing the 3 objectives that Loot and Pillage does, I've got 5 objectives scattered around the battlefield. You walk up to them and you loot them once. So they disappear after they've been looted once. And once you loot them, which you have to spend an action to do, then you have a treasure. And at the end, whoever has the most treasures scores 2 points for... Sorry, each player gets 2 points for each treasure. But then you also have to be taking care of the quarters of the field and sort of playing the no quarter game. No quarter is a really cool core book mission where, whoever basically spreads around the board the most effectively wins. It's really, really fun, except that it almost always ends in a tie. It doesn't almost always end in a tie, but it ends in a tie about half of the time, which is probably too much and maybe not the greatest mission design. So I wanted to keep the fun part of that, the fact that you score based on being able to control the whole board at once, and sort of combine that in a mission that was going to make it really hard to end up with ties. So I'm really happy with that. Including 5 treasures here, again, makes the points not line up for draws nearly as often. And it's also nice, so Loot and Pillage is all about brawling, where the best warband in a pure fight basically always wins Loot and Pillage. Now, it's kind of cool in the Rumble Pack because most of the Rumble Pack sort of favors just swarming bodies onto an objective and doesn't really favor being good at fighting, whereas Loot and Pillage actually does, so it plays a nice role there. But I wanted something that was a little bit different while keeping a lot of the best elements of it. And the best elements of Loot and Pillage are the fact that you can't just pop onto an objective and run away in the same activation very easily. So you're just stuck there when you take a treasure. And so it makes you really think about whether you even want to take a treasure or whether you want to stay there and fight on the point so that you maybe don't have the disadvantage of, having the treasure on you. You can disengage and stuff, but you are still fighting for the spot, and then you'll just take the treasure at the end if you win the fight, right? So a lot of really interesting decisions there that are still going to be here in this one, just with a little bit more spread out objectives. So I'm really excited about this one. I hope people try it. We've got a few of these here. I've got 12 of these. So I wanted to make an objective mission. This is one of the only ones in the whole pack that is sort of completely of my own design. I generally actually don't love homebrew or pure homebrew. I like to do sort of things that have gone through an actual game designer's touch, as it were, or, a game design team's playtesting, as it were. And so I generally shy away from those. You will generally see me either repackaging certain core book things, trying to highlight underutilized cards from various expansions, or you'll see others where I'm trying to fix core book missions that are a little bit broken but have something worth fighting for inside them. Here's one of the few ones where I've really done something a little bit more original. Before the battle, you put 5 objectives down, but each of them is dormant. A little bit like ley lines, to be honest. This is inspired half by ley lines and half by Loot and Pillage. Players can't be controlling an objective that is dormant. One thing about ley lines is you can sit on an objective in one round, activate it in the next round, and then actually leave it and not have any fighters on it, and you're still controlling it because you controlled it while it was dormant, which is just a really wonky rule that when it happens to people, they often get confused and feel like they've been, cheated is too heavy a word, but they feel like an injustice has been done upon them. So anyway, a fighter within 1 inch of a dormant objective can plant a flag on it. So it's sort of like the objective mission version of Loot and Pillage. It's sort of the opposite of Loot and Pillage, sort of. And that activates the objective, and you get a point when you plant a flag. And then at the end of the battle round, you get a point for each objective you control, same as most objective missions. The cool thing about this, so most objective missions, almost all the ones I can think of right now, favor slow warbands. In the Rumble Pack, any slow warband that can still manage to get 9 inches of movement is going to be massively favored. And most of the 3-inch move ones can, because they have things like OBR can give +1 move to a deployment group, or so like Gravelords can give a free move to one of their skeletons, or Nurgle can get +1 move to, a 7-inch radius, which is just enough to kind of track back and let fighters get to that magical 9 inches if they're sort of popping that and then using rush. So you have to really think about it if you're using a 3-inch move warband in those objective missions, but you can do it. And once you do have a warband that does it, you have a massive advantage on any sort of Rumble Pack objective mission. And Ley Lines gives a small advantage to slow warbands for the same reason as well, although a little bit less since you have that kind of dormant active game. What I like about Plant the Flag and what I wanted to do was create opportunities for a fast warband to score a lot of early points, because that's what's supposed to balance out objective missions. The Rumble Pack is supposed to be something where the fast warband, say in a 4 objective mission, grabs 3 in round 1, where the slow warband can only get 1, and then the slow one has to overwhelm the fast warband. The problem is it just doesn't work out that way because of how you can just be smart about abilities. In this one, I've kind of changed the game up here. So the dagger has to count to 9.9 to end a move within 1 inch of the north or south objective. And they have to get to 8 to get to the center objective. And that's just to end there, right? They haven't even scored the point because they haven't put their flag down. So it's tempting to have a 10-inch move fighter here so that you can get to one of these objectives. 9.9 won't do it, right? That's by design. 9.9 won't do it on the north or south objective if there's sort of any terrain in your way, right? So you'll need the full 10 inches of fly to be able to end your move within 1 inch of it. But otherwise, you could maybe do rush to get there. And then a 5-inch move fighter can do it, but if there's any terrain at all, they'll need to do rush. And that'll mean that a 4-inch move fighter, if there's no terrain in the way, they can rush to get there. But if there's any terrain at all, even rush is not going to get them there. And so that's by design, so that it gives the faster warbands a little bit of a boost, a little bit of the ability to get an early points advantage that they try to defend, that the slower warbands sort of weren't suffering from, even though the game designers clearly wanted them to be suffering that way in all of the current objective missions. So I'm really excited about that. The hammers also come in round 1, but they have even farther to go. Instead of 9.9 and 8, it's 11.5 and 9.6. So you would need like real speed for your hammers to be able to end within planting a flag range. Another cool thing you can do here, though, is if you are in your dagger and you have a move 5 fighter, you can get to ending round 1 within 1 inch of an objective, and then plant a flag and disengage. For example, if you're this blue dagger, you can come to the south objective, plant a flag, and then move 5 inches to be counting on the center objective, because you know you're not going to win this one because their shield can come on right on top of you if they want. So you can kind of, knowing that they're going to take an objective, you can steal one of the points from them if you're running a really fast warband. And you can steal that point without then just getting killed because you're standing on it. So lots of really cool stuff to kind of help fast warbands keep up. A lot of folks, you'll hear a lot of people talk about how Warcry really favors move 3 fighters right now. And I certainly agree with that statement. It's been kind of true all throughout 2.0, and I really think that this mission will kind of help a fast warband keep up in an objective mission where they can't normally. So I'm really excited about it. Here's another one, kind of simplifying a really good Rumble Pack combo. So Supremacy is really fun, but because there's 6 objectives to it, some of the secondary missions are just super awkward. Like if you're doing the no quarter one, it's just super awkward with supremacy. Or if you're doing the one big objective in the middle one, it's super awkward with supremacy. It's not that fun. So I really like supremacy, but I wanted to make sure I combined it with one of the Rumble Pack secondaries that I think works with it really well, and that is Early Grave. Early Grave lets you score X victory points if you take out an enemy leader. I added Hero, Thrall, or Ally. The reason for that is because soup warbands are currently really dominating the American meta, and I think they're dominating the Norwegian meta too. I think they would dominate any meta where they're played a lot, really. Soup warbands are really, really powerful, so having lots of fighters that aren't actually part of your faction is just a really strong thing to be doing. So this gives you points anytime you take out basically the leader or a sort of allied in or brought in fighter, where X is the battle round number, subtracted from 6. So there's a lot of points to be gained here by killy warbands, but those really killy warbands tend to be the ones that are also sort of risking the most points in this mission. And then swarms are just always going to be good on supremacy anyway. And so even if they're bad at scoring this secondary mission, they're just great at scoring the main points. And so they're going to have a chance too. So I think that this is a really great way to balance out this mission, give a wide variety of different warbands a real plan for how to do the mission. And of course, I'm still kind of relying on tried and true sort of designs here that have created fun games before. I just made a new deployment new deployment setup for this. I'm doing that for all of these just because I like designing these little maps here, and I like kind of setting up interesting interesting surprises for players who are kind of thinking about how they're going to move their fighters. So everyone loves Reaper. Not everyone. It's not my favorite mission, but a lot of people love Reaper, and I'm learning to like it. There is a balance issue with Reaper. The biggest fighter always dominates. Whoever has just the biggest, scariest fighter on the field, they are in not just the driver's seat, but just like a massive advantage. And so a lot of the time, there's just no way to fight back. If their scariest fighter can one-on-one fight your scariest fighter, there's a lot of the time no recourse. So I added a little mechanic to Reaper. Think of it as a twist. That's something I like with Reaper in general because there's a lot of just kind of being standoffish in Reaper. So I find that adding a twist to it, whether it's, more wild dice or, some of the sort of damage abilities where the board does damage to you. I don't normally like those abilities, but I do think they work with Reaper really well. Or sorry, those twists. I don't normally like those twists, but I think they work with Reaper really well. And sort of adding various twists kind of changes how you have to play Reaper and kind of makes you think a little bit differently about the mission. And so I created my own twist to kind of deal with this balance issue. So I made the Forsaken mechanic. Each player chooses one fighter in the opposing warband with the highest wounds total in that warband. So it has to be one of their biggest, chunkiest guys. And then all of your fighters basically get +1 to hit and +1 critical hit for damage, for attack actions that target it. So obviously this is really strong for ranged warbands, but luckily most of those are not that powerful. It's really just Kharadron Overlords and some flavors of Tzeentch. But otherwise, this is a really great mechanic for helping fighters deal with the massive stompy thing that's just destroying everyone, right? Because now if you overcommit your, giant terrifying tyrant or Fomeroid crusher, now you can actually get punished, because if you end up surrounded by, a bunch of 3-3-1-3 fighters, well, now they're 3-3-2-4s, and so now it only takes a couple 5s and 6s for you to actually be really hurting. So I'm really optimistic about, how that could change Reaper. I think most good twists make Reaper go from a mission I'm pretty medium on to a mission I really like. And so I just wanted to kind of give my own contribution to twists on Reaper that make it fun. Okay, so now we're going to get into missions that have just one deployment group on the battlefield. I really like mixing the core book and Rumble Pack right now because I like mixing up how many deployment groups are on the field. I don't like in just Rumble Pack tournaments where there's always only one deployment group on the field. I kind of I don't like that setup as much, and so I don't like it being the default. But here I like having kind of some variety, so I've done 6 of each. So I'm going to start with Rising Dread, and it's really just another, again, just bringing out the best of the Rumble Pack for folks who maybe are a little intimidated by the RNG of it or the needing to explore which combinations work for you, those sorts of dynamics. So this is just Power Struggle plus Predator and Prey with a slightly different deployment group to kind of give some different challenges, some different things to think about for people who have already played it a few times. So I find that Power Struggle, of all of the Rumble Pack objective missions, it's the one that is the most balanced because it's the one where really fighty warbands actually have a chance to really catch up in points. And so I think that that's really solid. And so then that's all you really need. And then Predator and Prey create some really interesting dynamics, I find. In later rounds, it helps the sort of warband with the most hitting power because they can pick out an enemy fighter that they know that they can kill. But in early rounds, it actually kind of helps the more numerous warband because they can point to a fighter from the opponent and say, if that fighter is contesting an objective, I score 2 points. And so now the opponent is in this really awkward situation where, they thought that because it was an early round, the other person's not going to be able to kill anything and they're safe, right? Not going to have to worry about scoring this. But now they've got a fighter who can't contest an objective without giving up points. And if they take that fighter off the objective, they won't have enough bodies on objectives to score as much as they want. And so it can really be something that empowers the Swarm Warband to go up 3-1 on objectives kind of early on. And then later on, if the sort of more killy player is playing smart, it then empowers them to kind of turn the tables more quickly. So it kind of creates a lot of kind of skill testing, interesting situations, and a lot of room for wild swings in the momentum of a game. And so I actually like it. I think it plays a lot better than it reads. So I really like this combo. I've played it in the Rumble Pack a few times. This is kind of just a new iteration on it. Just trying to republish it for people who maybe haven't played through the Rumble Pack very much. Maybe people who aren't sure, what they should try first. I think this is a really good combination that people should try. All right, this is a wild one, and I think that's really fun. So this is sort of inspired by Stolen Wares, which is a secondary objective out of the Rumble Pack. Drink if you've heard that one before. So it's really fun with Rumble objective missions, but it's a real mess. One is that points totals don't really always add up in an interesting way. So, for example, Power Struggle, there's a million points that are scored from the various objectives, and so getting 2 points at the end of the game for each treasure that you carry just never makes a difference. And then in other ones, like, for example, I don't remember the name, but the one where there's 4 objectives and you only get 1 point for each objective. The treasures end up being really, really important where it's almost worth it to mostly focus on them and just try to tie the objectives every time, just 2-2. There's just a wild swing in how much it matters, and like I said, it's a bit of a mess. So I wanted to create something that kind of took that to heart, the kind of having objectives and treasures on the board at the same time, but made kind of a points thing where each was kind of roughly equally important. And so here I've got 3 objectives. I've got what I think personally is a really interesting dynamic as far as how each player accesses those objectives and their abilities to get to the objectives based on where you start and where you kind of come on in round two. You know, feel free to draw up the geometry lines for your own warband as you see fit. And then, of course, I think this is a really good balance in terms of how many points you get from treasures versus how many points you get from objectives over the course of the game. There's just 20 available points, but I don't think you're going to get ties all that often. I think the ideal mission, for example, draws should happen maybe 1 in 5 times, maybe 1 in 6, right? Draws should be happening in a tournament. They help kind of stratify the field, but any mission that has draws like half the time is a real problem. I don't think you're going to get draws all that often, even though there's exactly 20 points up for grabs. But I do think that you're going to have a really interesting time looking through, trying to figure out, especially it's going to be difficult in rounds kind of 2 and 3, figuring out how important the treasures are going to be vis-a-vis the objectives. And I think it's going to create a lot of really deep gameplay that people are going to really, they're going to really like, as long as they don't mind tracking, right? This is one where there's 7 things to track as opposed to some that only have 4, right? Some that have none. So if you don't mind doing a little bit of tracking, I think this is going to be a fun one. Okay, so Hidden Vault is from the core book. Like I said, I like a lot of core book missions, but a lot of them are kind of broken once you get into them. So Hidden Vault's really fun. It's the one where there's 3 objectives and each player burns 1, and then you fight over the last objective. It only scores in round 4. So there's not really any replayability to it. There's really only 2 ways to win Hidden Vault. I won't say them here, but other people can, find them out. And it's unfortunate because once you've played a lot, you essentially know who's going to win in kind of midway through round 2, because like I said, there's only 2 ways to win. And so part of the reason for that is because you only count at the end of round 4. And so I kind of created a version of Hidden Vault that has a lot of what I like about Hidden Vault, right? You have the burning of objectives, so that if there's an objective the opponent controls that you can never score on, you can just say, okay, I'm not going to worry about that one. I'll worry about the other 4. And then your opponent gets to do the same thing to you. But then instead of only having 1 objective left that you all just crowd around on and wait until the end of the game, and whoever's alive at the end of the game wins, you actually have 3 objectives. And so there's a lot more permutations about how those objectives can end in this one than there are in Hidden Vault. And so that, I think, fixes the core problem with Hidden Vault and the reason why it gets so stale so quickly. I think Burning Past is going to be a much more interesting version. And then also, the scoring starts in round 3 instead of just round 4. So there's 6 points up for grabs. Again, draws are possible, but I don't think they'll be that common. And so it just means that a wider variety of warbands are going to be able to succeed in it, and a wider variety of decision trees are going to be available to the players. And so it's going to make a slightly more interesting game without really being a ton of burden, right? There's still just 5 objectives, same as a ton of missions, and you're getting rid of them. So there, you're literally fewer things to track every round. So, if Helter Skelter seems too complicated for you, Burning Past is going to be much simpler, pretty straightforward, but still incredibly deep with strategy, hopefully, in a way that Hidden Vault really only achieves that the first 2 or 3 times you play it, and then kind of stops. The hope is Burning Past is going to have much more layers to it and a lot more replayability there. So I'm excited, and I think a lot of people will enjoy this, especially if you do currently enjoy Hidden Vault. I think you'll like Burning Past just as much. Frantic Search. I keep trying to fix treasure missions, if you'll notice, right? A lot of treasure missions in the previous world have been kind of broken, kind of not quite working. And so I've been looking a lot at which treasure missions are really good and iterating on them, because that's the kind of thing I enjoy. So this is inspired by Search for Varanite. And this is, I think, the first really good treasure mission that they did. So, Search for Varanite is a red harvest card. Again, my love of finding the best cards from expansions that maybe not a lot of people played and sort of bringing them to light. Here, if a fighter is touching terrain, so they can be on top of it or just within 1 inch of it, I'll call 1 inch touching, they can spend an action to search for treasure. This is something I've learned from Loot and Pillage. All the good treasure missions, having to spend an action to pick up the treasure stops you from being able to really easily run away with it. And so I think that's going to be really important. The terrain, your opponent is going to know where you can get treasure easily. And so that's going to kind of help them plan for where you'll be when you have the treasure, which is really important. And then they can roll a d6, but they add 2 to the roll if they are at least 2 inches above the battlefield. So this is going to incentivize people to try to control platforms. Most missions, most matched play missions, put all the objectives on the battlefield floor. I switched that up with Might Makes Right, but all the others I let it be on the battlefield floor to kind of create the geometrical maps that are really interesting to me. But I do love using terrain in games, and so I didn't want to just only have one pro-terrain mission in my pack. I wanted to make sure I had at least 2, and so this is going to be a very pro-terrain mission. You're going to be very heavily incentivized to use all the terrain at your disposal, but you're going to kind of have a treasure mission instead of an objective mission doing it. So you have to give up actions to get treasure. You have to roll for treasure, and so where you go really is important for whether or not you can get any treasure. And then the other thing I've learned is the more treasure in a treasure mission, the more balanced it is. The 3 treasure missions, or God forbid the 1 treasure mission in the core book, none of those are very balanced. They often create really uninteresting gameplay, but when there's a ton of treasures, it gets much harder to protect all of your carriers. You can't just have one 10-inch flyer that takes a treasure and then runs away with it, flies to a treasure 10 inches and then runs 8 inches away with it. You can't really do that when you have 6 treasures to fight for. And so I think that's going to be really good. And then I've added just a little bit of damage. That is part of Search for Varanite, is the Varanite deals damage to you. And I just think that, the ways to constrain treasure carriers, one is to punish them for being within 4 inches of the battlefield floor. I've got that in a few missions here. 4 inches of the battlefield edge. I've got that in a few missions here. And the other is to do damage to them. And so I've kind of put that here to stop or to just make it harder to just pass it off forever, right? You can't just hide in a corner with it without taking some cost to yourself, and then your opponent can track you down a little bit more easily. I've also done that with deployment here a little bit. There's not a ton of corners to go hide in where the opponent can't reach you at some point. And so I think that's really important. I'm really excited to hear how this plays out. I think it'll play out really differently depending on what terrain set you play with. And so that's really cool. So hopefully this is a good tool for TOs to use if they want to try stuff. The Great Hunt. This one I'm really excited about, but this is one I really want people to play test because I think it's going to take some work to get it perfect. So I've gotten, I think, a version I'm happy with to start, and I'm really interested to see how it goes for people. So one of the sort of staples of 1.0, in fact, one of the types of games that really made me fall in love with Warcry is each player has to destroy the opponent's shield, or each player has to destroy the opponent's dagger or hammer. And those missions are amazing. The fact that they were in the sort of shuffler meant that you had to respect the fact, you had to kind of balance your deployments because you had to respect the fact that you might just get put in a position where your most vulnerable deployment could just die, right? There was a 1 in 12 chance with every draw off the top of the deck that you would have to defend your most vulnerable deployment group. So that was really fun and created a lot of balance back when we used to only play Warcry by drawing cards off the top of a deck. I know a lot of people still do that now, and I have nothing against it. Obviously, I'm nostalgic for those days. I think it's a really fun way to play. But while their presence makes for a lot of really good balance in deck shuffle versions of the game, they kind of do the opposite for opposite for tourneys, where putting one in your tournament basically incentivizes people to completely unbalance their lists for the tournament. And so it makes really wonky experiences if you put it in an event. Now, if you say it's going to be random, maybe that changes it. But then some people are just going to want to gamble. You know, it's going to create feel bads if you do that in a tournament. So I decided to experiment with letting the players choose which deployment group they would have to kill. And that hopefully makes it sort of much more usable in events and hopefully tempts some TOs to try it. I really hope I convince people to try out my mission pack for actual events. I'm really excited about sort of everything I've created here. But on top of that, I knew that if I was going to do that, if I was going to sort of allow players to choose, it was going to need to be with a deployment setup that tempts you to try a bunch of different things. So that's what I've tried here, and I'm interested for people to tell me how I did. So the shields are going to be obviously a really tempting target because they start on the board. So if you have an ability to maybe hurt your opponent's shield, you might just decide to try out choosing them first, getting a head start, putting a bunch of damage on their shield. Each sort of dagger and hammer deployment, though, if you choose that, then at the very beginning of the battle round, they're going to have to deploy within 4 inches of the battlefield edge. So you're just going to get D6 on every fighter in their group, which is going to be really strong for you, and it's going to really tempt you to choose those instead. So there's going to be actual sort of trade-offs that you have to make in terms of deciding what you want to aim for, whether you want to be trying to get as much damage in early as you can, sort of hunting them from the start, or if you just want to take the free damage and go. I'm a little bit concerned here about, certain dynamics. If you say choose your opponent's dagger and then just run your shield right up to them and then just get a bunch of free damage. But if you do that, your opponent can then, chase you down with their shield. We're choosing at the end of the first battle round here, so you can it behooves you to be coy about which one you're going to be choosing, right? You might want to send a few of your fighters towards your opponent's shield and then one towards their dagger and then choose their dagger and try to take it out and take advantage of that damage there. But then if you've done that, what if they just choose your shield and now all of your shield is in combat, right? So I think you need to be really cagey with your strategy in the first round, and then at the end of the first round, the players choose, and that's going to be really interesting. I've realized here that I should put the choice on a dice roll for who chooses first. I'll write that into the mission, but for now, if you've seen this, just roll a die to decide which player chooses first. I'm really excited about this one. I do think it's going to need some play testing, right? It's possible maybe the hammers are not as involved as they should be, though, they are they're on the the long edge, but the closer to the center of the battlefield edge, so they'll be better at hunting things than they would otherwise be. So there's kind of a lot of knobs to turn as far as rebalancing this mission, right? I can even just subtle changes in where things deploy will actually change the overall balance of this mission. And so I'm really curious to see people playtest this one and let me know how it goes, because there's a lot that I can tweak here. Okay, so more sort of messing around with Rumble missions and the core book. Tides of Battle is a Rumble Pack mission where you have 6 objectives around the field. Whoever didn't win initiative gets to choose one of them to be the primary objective, and then you play at that point, and there's one objective worth 2 and all the rest are worth 1. It's pretty fun. One thing I've noticed is the Swarmy Warband tends to be really good at winning 4-3 in rounds 2 and 3, and usually 3-2 in round 1 as well. And so then it sort of is on the sort of more elite warband to kill so many things that they win 5-2 in round 4, and that's just a really difficult, it's a difficult mountain to climb. So, cool thing about Reaper, the scoring system is really, really simple. So it makes for an awesome secondary objective for a Rumble Pack mission. Reaper, there's 4 points up for grabs. It's really easy to track, who's killed the most stuff. And so whoever kills the most stuff just gets a victory point that round. And so now, before, again, like I said, it's really easy for the Swarmy Warband to win 4-3 because you basically, if they win initiative, they choose the primary, they win that one. Generally, the Killier Warband is better at winning whatever the primary objective is because they can put all their forces to it and get kills on it, and also have big bases that body block you off it. But then they just can't do everything else. So the Swarm Warband wins all the other objectives, and then it usually ends up being 4-3. With Reaper, all of a sudden, you're at a lot of risk of that being 4-4, and now the Swarmy Warband has to at least have some kind of plan. They don't just get to win for free just by having bodies, right? They have to have some kind of plan to either do better than just winning 4-3 in some of the mid-game rounds, or they need to actually have ways to kill some of the big fighters to steal a point or two on Reaper. And so that's really exciting, and I think creates a dynamic that is just healthy for objective missions to have. It's when you win an objective mission because all you did was stand there with your more numbers, it doesn't create compelling gameplay. It honestly just creates really boring gameplay. So creating really smart secondary objectives for those objective missions, I think, is sort of the key to having fun in the Rumble Pack. The Rumble Pack does have a few really interesting secondaries, as I've shown by using 3 of them already in my pack, right? But I'm always on the hunt for more interesting ones, and we have already play-tested, already part of Warcry, things that can be used as secondary objectives, and Reaper is one of them, so I'm really excited about it. That's all my missions. That's 12 of them. I put a lot of thought into all of these, honestly, and I think most of them are going to give really good games. I've playtested Might Makes Right a bunch. I'm going to start sort of getting through the other ones, and the May 6th tournament is going to have 4 of these. I will have the final pack up in a week from today, and so you'll know which 4 I'm going to be playing in that tournament, and I'm really excited to have everyone try it out. I think these are going to be pretty balanced. I think these are going to make it so that just good synergistic warband design and good play kind of carry the day if you're doing 4 sort of a wide variety of these, maybe a couple of the objective ones, a couple of the hunter ones, and kind of see how that shakes out. I've done a lot of things like taking missions that really favor one type of warband and adding a little twist to give other types of warbands more of a shot in them. So I'm really curious to see how people kind of take those twists and run with them and kind of change their list building, or just allow them to make really balanced lists work, as opposed to having to skew one way or the other. So very excited for this. I hope people try it. If other people don't try it, I will be running a whole tournament with it, and I'm really excited about that, and I will certainly tell you all how it goes. So until then, may all your rolls be crits.